and we're recording. I'm going to edit out the bloopers, so don't worry about that. If I could get you both to state your names and then spell your names as well, and then if you want to use your nickname, that's fine. Either way. Go ahead.
My daughter's texting me. My name is Cynthia Young, CYNTHIA YOUNG, from the Rosebud Sioux Tribal Education Department. What else did you want?
That's good.
Okay.
I'm Richard Lunderman. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux Tribal Council representing Rosebud community. I'm also on the vice chairman of the Rosebud Sioux Tribal Education Committee, and I serve on the St. Francis Indian School Board as a representative from the Tribal Education Committee.
Great. So we're building this course for, it's called the Introduction to Tribal Education. And from your perspectives, what is it that you would want people to know about what you do in tribal education, and how do you think people, what do you think they should know about tribal education in general? Either one of you can start.
Well, I think first of all, we have to recognize that we have a crisis in Indian education, and we've had a crisis for a long time. The education as it's been delivered to us as Indian people is not appropriate, it's not relevant, and it's not responsive to our needs, any of our needs, our social needs, our emotional needs, our economic needs, our educational needs, our governmental needs, community needs. It's just missing the boat. Has for a long time, but it never was meant to do that either, so we shouldn't really be surprised. But we're in this system, this failed system, and we need to develop another alternative to get our kids out of that system into a more appropriate system that's going to make them contributors to a global society now in 2013 and beyond.
Excellent. What about you, Cindy?
I agree. I feel the same way, and working in a tribal school, I have not worked in a public school, but in my job now as tribal ed director, I work closely with the public school system. And because the public school system is on the reservation, and our unique situation for Rosebud is that it was a VIA school to begin with, and then it was turned over to the state by the people in power at the time in the 50s. And so it's a real unique situation where we have integrated language and culture into the school systems, both of them. But of course we have to follow the standards of the state to become accredited school, so that the kids will have a diploma that they can use to go to college. At this time, we may be able to change that, which is something that we really need to look at, and that's one of the tasks that we have at the tribal ed departments across the Indian country, is that with our tribal ed code that we would have our own standards, we would have our own tribal curriculum, we would be able to have tribal control of the education of our students, so that they would know who they are. They would be able to learn their language. You know, it was taken away long ago, and so all of their parents and the grandparents don't encourage that. They don't know. They've bought into the assimilation process that schools created, that schools were meant to do in the first place. But now we want to take back. We want to take back that, and we want to educate our kids about who they are. If our kids have a good grounding of who they are, which we could do through tribal curriculum and tribal standards, then they would be more successful in the world that we live in. And when I was a counselor, I always told kids that you have to be competent in the world you live in, and that white man's world. And you have to be able to do that to not to survive. And I don't think that we're there, but that's what I used to teach to kids. And I think a lot of the grandparents are saying, no, you have to do whatever. Either the grandparents and the parents don't want their kids in the schools, they're on one extreme to the other extreme. We need the middle ground. They either want their kids to get educated in the white man's way, or they don't want anything to do with it. But we need to be in the middle ground, and I think tribal ed departments, that's one of our jobs to do. With that tribal ed code allows us to do that, but it's really difficult to implement the tribal ed codes, especially if you're dealing with the public schools on the reservation or near the reservation, which majority of our reservations are in that situation.
In your situation, if you could, characterize the responsibilities of tribal education agencies in relationship to the tribe is a sovereign country, a nation. But you also have to deal with things that states deal with. You also have to deal with things that LEAs deal with. You have to deal with things that they don't have to deal with, like, hey, my kid, is sick and I don't have any money. Can you get us a ride to the hospital? You have to deal with things that social service agencies deal with. You're so unlike federal agencies and state agencies and schools. You are totally unique, but you have to do everything they do and more.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yep. In our tribal ed department, we have a truancy intervention project. It was a project, and it became a program. We kept it because the majority of our students who are not in school are because of social problems. And so I changed our truancy intervention from truant officers to family intervention advocates, where they would go to get referrals from the schools. We have to go, prioritize which referral, which kid is closer to being saved than one that's being dropped, and then we have to work with every kid. Some of them will have to be on a plan that maybe they have to go away to a boarding school, maybe they have to do a GED. But the ones that we are able to get back in school, the family advocates go out and find out that there are all kinds of social problems, and so we also have to connect with the schools and call the school and explain to them that this is what's going on and da 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 da. And so we now have a court. Now the court has they have some different grants that they're working on doing the same thing to empower what we're doing. So our load isn't as hard as it has been because there are other entities now seeing the same thing, the court, the children's court. So that helps out where we're making a collaborative effort. And our tribe has a few other grants like the DCI, which is Defending Children's Initiative, and they're able to catch some of those things and deal with some of those issues from the other perspective that we would just be referring anyway. And so it's getting lighter, but it's never ending. It's a never ending job. The reason our kids are not in school it's a magnitude of issues, and they're not simple little things that we can fix. And then the current system that we're under at the state level or even the national level, the public education system, which also our tribal schools follow that same system, is just a failing system, and it's not providing the kind of education that we want for our kids to be successful in school. And they don't see it as an important thing either. They don't see how it relates to their everyday business of what they experience in their lives. And so there's just a whole magnitude of different things that need to be changed. And we need to keep in mind all those things we can do that we've been told by the Bureau that we can make those changes, and we'll see if we are able to work with them to do those kinds of things. But my big dream is that we would have tribal control of education is that we replace those BIE offices. We become the people that provide all those services, the monitoring, the fiscal management, the educational curriculum, everything. If the tribal ed departments were able to do all the things that the BIE office does, we will be able to help all our students become.
Do you see that as reclaiming tribal sovereignty over education?
Yes. We need to take charge of our education, and that it's a radical idea and people are afraid to do that, but that's the only way that we are going to have true sovereign control over our education, and we can do that. They tell us we can do that. We just need to.
We have to believe it.
We have to believe that we can do that, but we are being controlled by the dollars that they control. And my office is funded by our tribe, which is different. That we could do little innovative things, but our tribal schools are afraid to do that. So we don't have control. We don't have true control. I think the only way we're going to have true control is that we take over those functions, and we be able to help our students become self-sufficient and good citizens that will be contributing to the tribe in the future when we're gone. Because it's scary with the young kids, the thinking that the young kids have. Here in South Dakota, they may sell the black kills because they're getting caught up into the white man's world. And so it's real important that we take control and teach them about the history of what happened to them and what kinds of things that are good from both worlds that we need to progress and to protect.
Could you say a little bit about hi.
You have to listen to us. Huh?
Could you say a little bit about the curriculum, Ocheti, or Shakwang?
Ocheti Shakowi.
Shakwang. Okay, I'm gonna get it once.
Shakowi is number 7.
Shakwang.
Shakowi is the number 7.
Ocheti is the family.
Ocheti is the, yeah.
7 families. Okay. Could you say a little bit about the curriculum, Ocheti, Shakwang, and how that may impact, or how you all, as a tribal education agency, has impacted that curriculum, and how then you may, in fact, use that curriculum in your own tribe?
That Ocheti Shakowi curriculum that was developed by the state with a grant. They used Gear Up money, and they used other grants. When they ran out, then they used Gear Up money. But we have 3 tribal members working that have worked with it. Their intent was to have a representative from each of the 7 tribes to contribute to that curriculum. We had Lydia Whirlwind Soldier and Dottie LeBeau. She's not from our tribe, but she's lived there and worked there. And then I advised them to work with Victor DeVille from SGU to get the correct and information on the traditional, the resources, because he's real extensive in history. But the intent of that Ocheti Shakowi understandings is that it was developed for the state, the public schools, to learn about the natives in the state of South Dakota and part of North Dakota, because we're connected from Standing Rock. The intent is not to use that as a standalone curriculum. It's to be used by those public schools, and right now it's only in the social studies area, to be used as a resource of teaching the public school students about natives. You know, we have native students that attend public school that have been urbanized and don't know about their culture, so then they'll have a chance to learn about their culture. But the intent was not to be used on the reservations. In the reservation schools, we need to develop our own, but of course we would use those as a curriculum. There's all kinds of different curriculums out there now, and I see is that we use all of them to make one. But my dream is that our tribal ed department would also develop a curriculum that could be used in our schools, that we would mandate all our schools, our tribal schools, and we would offer it to the public schools. We would eventually want to copyright it and sell it to the public schools, but with money situation at this point, it's critical that they get the information. And so the state doing that, I really support that. I was on that team when they first started that, and it was whittled down to the people who actually would do the work. The native specialists in curriculum from each of those tribes are part of that team that developed that. And then they said they would try to keep it going, and it hasn't happened yet. But what they have done has developed and grown, and it's real. I think it's a really important thing that the state schools use that curriculum to help educate our people, you know, to break down the different barriers, the racism that is part of what South Dakota State is unfortunately supporting. And so I'm really grateful that we are able to have that at the state level. But we still have lots of work to do at the tribal ed department level. And I know we talked about the the curriculum that the BIE was implementing, and that was geared for the students in the bureau schools. But it was like one fit all tribes. So that's where that's become a failure. You have to customize it for each of your tribes, and that's a given for everything that we have at this time. No.
Okay. Well, miigwech plamia, right? Try to get that right. What I will do